Hello YouTube. Tamriel is full of strange wonders and mysterious places, but one of the coolest bits of lore that we know very little about is the walking city of Falinesti, a gigantic tree filled with Bosmer homes in its branches that walks throughout all of Valenwood. The walking city's tale is quite an interesting one, and considering there's a good chance we get to see it in the upcoming Elder Scrolls Online expansion, I think it is a good time to brush up on what we already know about the walking city of Falinesti. So let's take a look. So, Falinesti. Historically it's been one of the biggest cities in Valenwood, with one of the highest densities of wood elf population. Apparently population-wise it's only rivaled by the city of Eldenroot, which can be seen as a sister city of sorts. Because just like Eldenroot, Falinesti was built into a gigantic Elden tree, an extremely large species of tree related to the mighty Grot Oaks of Valenwood, which are the biggest species of tree found on all of Tamriel, as we talked about in my video on the tree species of Tamriel. Now, apparently, according to Bosmer legend, all of these Grot Oaks and their relative species were once able to walk around freely on their roots, with almost all deciding to root down somewhere permanently during the Merethic era. According to those legends, Falinesti's Elden Tree was an exception to this, and instead of permanently rooting down somewhere, the city would continue to wander across the jungles of Valenwood for eternity. Now, whether this is true or not, we don't know. We know very little to begin with about how it walks, only that it does walk, or at least move, and that it moves between 4 sites for every season of the year. As such, it has a spring, summer, autumn and winter site, where it temporarily roots down every year for some time, only to then start walking towards the next site. Because of this predetermined pattern, some have speculated that it were ancient wood elves in the middle to late Merethic era who actually enchanted the tree's roots and pre-programmed it, so to say, so it would walk across the province in emulation of massive creatures out of legends. Which of those theories is true, we don't know. However, the people of Valenwood do seem to believe that the tree itself is the driving force behind its travels, since apparently sometimes it deviates from its usual routes, sometimes walking for days, sometimes walking for weeks towards the next site, and it doesn't really seem to have anyone steering the tree. It seems to do everything by itself. On top of that, some people sometimes call it the massive tree beast, as if it's a creature. So I personally lean more towards the idea that it's a massive creature of sorts that the Bosmer have built a city in, but I suppose we will only find out if we ever get to visit the city and learn more about it. That being said, while there's a lot that we don't know about its origins and movement, there are some things that we do know about the legendary walking city. For one, we know its roots. We know the city roots down in spring in the southwest of Valenwood, then it strides to the northwest in summer. In autumn it then walks east towards the Elsewhere border, where it roots down until winter comes again, when it moves down towards the south of Valenwood to the southwest, only to then return to the spring side once again when spring comes. In that way it walks in a circle every year. We know that the city, when it comes to any of the rooting places, drives its roots deep into the ground, sometimes into existing tunnels, to anchor itself to the earth. And we know that in the process of getting back up for its next walk in the coming season, that costs immense amount of force to get the roots back out of the ground. In the few days prior to the city resuming its yearly trek, the Bosmer of the city can feel the tree rumble violently every once in a while, with the tree's green and golden leaves falling down like a rain to the ground below. This must be quite a challenge for the many Bosmer living in both the tree's bowels and across its many sprawling branches, as I just imagine all their stuff falling over like with earthquakes. But despite this hassle, the Bosmer of the city tend to celebrate the uprooting, so when the city resumes to walk. And they also celebrate the rooting, so when it settles down for a season again, as both are accompanied with elaborate ceremonies. In accordance with the Green Pact, Bosmer may not harm the trees of Valenwood in any way, shape or form. This is why, just like in all other Bosmer cities, the houses and other living spaces in Falinesti have all been magically created by shaping the branches, bowels and stem of the tree during their growth and making them artificially grow using magic. This is why Bosmer houses all across the province, and probably also those of Falinesti, are always kind of pod-shaped, because the Bosmer shaped them during their growth and cannot alter them using tools or weapons. This is why all the living spaces in the city, including a whole palace, are all grown out of the tree rather than built in the tree. But it doesn't end at living spaces, as the Bosmer have also magically shaped many platforms and walkways out of the branches as narrow makeshift streets between the living pods in the canopy of the tree, and they even tend to control vines using magic that have platforms attached to them as makeshift elevators in order to get around the city levels in the tree's massive canopy, which is divided into several city districts and thus has several sort of streets and highways and even these moving platforms between them. Now, as I mentioned, the city is divided into several districts, because most Bosmer in the city seems to live either in the tree's bowels or in the stem, or across the many branches in the city's massive canopy. And it seems that Bosmer of lower standing live lower in the tree, so either in the tree's stem, bowels, or lower in the canopy, with higher in the canopy being the Bosmer of the highest standing, with a large magically grown palace at the very top of the branches where the Bosmer Camoran kings used to settle. You see, because of the city's immense size and its mobility, being a walking city that roams all across Valenwood, the city has historically functioned as the capital of Valenwood, from where the Camoran kings of Valenwood ruled the province, with the city's mobility making it easy to bring the entire court along across the province. Now, somewhere during the early Second Era, between 200 and 500 years before the Elder Scrolls Online takes place, when Valenwood was part of the Cyrillic Empire, then under the reign of the Akaviri potentates, first Rushe and Severian Chorak, something extremely strange happened at that time. Falinesti unrooted itself, started walking, and it just disappeared mysteriously. Nobody knows where it went, nobody knows why it went away, whether the tree itself chose to disappear or whether it was somehow abducted. We don't know. What we do know is that all its inhabitants magically disappeared with it, a traumatic experience of those left behind, as we have seen examples both in lore and in-game in the Elder Scrolls Online of families being literally ripped apart as family members are stuck on the city, which is now nowhere left to be found, while others are still outside the city, now searching for the city and their missing family members. Who can't even be sure whether or not those people in the city are even still alive. And not only Bosmer disappeared, both some wood orcs and the Imga, a primitive and pretty hilarious species of intelligent apes native to Valenwood, they all disappeared alongside the city. While some tribes of wood orcs still remain in Valenwood, the Imga all but disappeared, mysteriously alongside the city, with many Bosmer speculating that the Imga are either all in the city, wherever it may be now, or the remaining Imga retreated into the deeper jungles of Valenwood to desperately search for the city where their fellow Imga and friends are now captured, which is then why we don't see them in the game. There are many conspiracy theories about why the city disappeared. Some think it walked into the sea, some think a god or Daedra abducted it and now is stuck in some obscure realm somewhere. Some think it's now on one of Tamriel's moons, and others again think it's somehow walking back or forward in time, which is why we don't see it in the present in the Elder Scrolls Online. Others think it may have something to do with some celestial chicken. Literally, this is all in the game. But, you know, the theory on walking forward or backwards in time, especially forwards, may be right, since we don't know anything about what happened to the city, but we do know that the city mysteriously reappeared at some point before the Third Era. But I personally think that the theory of a god or a Daedric prince capturing the city somehow and bringing it to their realms is a bit more likely. Because you see, in the Elder Scrolls Online, we have several quests at the seasonal sites, you know, the sites where Falinesti historically used to root for 1/4 of the year. One of those quests at those sites implies that the Khajiit trickster god Regine may have taken the city to some other realm, and one other site implies that Mephala might have done it, you know, a Daedric prince. And I'm speculating here and expect a follow-up video if this is the case. But in ZeniMax's recent Elder Scrolls Online new chapter tease, the good people of the UESP actually spotted some Mephala-related symbols and references to Falinesti. So I can definitely see rescuing Falinesti from some Oblivion realm it landed in because of Mephala as a good potential plotline. But we will have to see about that. I may be wrong and we may not get any answers regarding Falinesti and its disappearance, but still, it's interesting to think about. Either way, there are many Bosmer who fervently believe that the city will one day return to them and reappear just as mysteriously as it one day disappeared. They call themselves the Falinesti Faithful, and they tend to the different sites that the city once called home, aiming to keep them unoccupied and ready for when the city one day returns. And they were right, as we don't know how or when, but the city one day returned and was once more made the capital of Valenwood, with the Camoran kings returning to their palace in the city. That having been said, we don't really know how the Camoran rulers even escaped the disappearance, because in the Elder Scrolls Online we have King Camoran Eredon, or Eredon Camoran, but he's been king for only 100 years or so, maybe less, so when he became king, Falinesti was already long gone. How one of the kings before him escaped Falinesti, we don't know, especially since that used to be the seat of the kings. Perhaps the king at the time even disappeared with the city, and his cousin or son or any other relative who wasn't in Falinesti might have taken over. That would make for quite an interesting plotline where we have to visit the city during the Elder Scrolls Online if the old king or queen still lives, but that's far too much speculation for me, so let's keep it grounded in what we know for now. For one, we know that during the Septim Empire, when Tiber Septim and his heirs ruled Valenwood, they kept the Camoran kings on as their provincial rulers and allowed them to keep themselves based in the city of Falinesti. In addition to that, by the end of the Third Era, a bit before the events of the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, the city has apparently rooted itself for far longer than normal, seemingly at the summer site, with some speculating that it might have finally rooted itself for good, just like all the other trees, if the Bosmer legend proves to be the right theory. But we haven't heard anything on that since the time of Oblivion, so between Oblivion and Skyrim, it may just have uprooted itself again and started walking again. The only bit of 4th era information that we have on Falinesti is that it also falls under the Altmerry Dominion and is now under Thalmor rule, which prior to the Great War, some kind of blades operation against the Thalmor has taken place in the city of Falinesti. It's called the Falinesti Incident, in which Esbern of the Blades apparently played some kind of role, but we don't know anything more other than the name of the incident, which is the Falinesti Incident. But still, having a walking city like that, that's still an extremely interesting bit of lore, and its disappearance from the world in the Second Era and the subsequent tease of, including Falinesti references in the Elder Scrolls Online new chapter perhaps, gives me hope that perhaps sooner or later we may get answers to the questions that this video posed, in which case I'll likely make a video along the lines of why Falinesti disappeared as a follow-up for this video, so keep an eye out for that in the future. I might add it in the description here if you're watching in like 2 years and you're like, all this information was wrong. In which case I'll probably take this video offline, but still. Anyway, that's basically all I can tell you about the walking city of Falinesti, and I really hope that you enjoyed this video and learned something new about the Elder Scrolls lore today. And if you did, maybe consider subscribing to the channel and returning for more Elder Scrolls lore videos in the future. Now, all that remains for me to be done is to thank my top Patreon supporters, Mr. Bernardo Binna, Gabriel Binna, Polar Rasputin, Athena Hyotis, Dragonborn of Nerevar, Volcure of Argonia, King Chris, Bulge, Scrub of the Scrolls, Doji, Fenrir, Soda Bushido, Rakai, and Mr. Christmas. It's thanks to these people and all the others on screen that this channel stays alive, and for that I'm very grateful. That said, I hope to see all of you in the next Elder Scrolls lore video next week. Bye bye.